Question 24 was the first question of Core 2, asking students to explain how carbohydrate loading can improve performance. This question was worth 5 marks, and there was a series of lines that students would need to complete to indicate or show their level of knowledge. So some key parts of this question here. First of all, looking at explain, we're going to talk about how carb loading can improve performance. That's what it is. All right. So what's the relationship between carbohydrate loading and improving performance? That's what the question's asking students to do. We just have a look at the syllabus to see where these questions come from. This part here, nutritional considerations, pre-performance, including carbohydrate loading. All right, so that's the first thing there that students would need to be aware of, is that when we talk about carbohydrate loading, we are talking about pre-performance. There is no carb loading taking place during performance, and there is no carb loading taking place post-performance. Carbohydrate loading is happening before the actual performance takes place. We just have a look at an answer supplied here. This is a very, very good answer. I felt that students really struggled with this question, and for 5 marks, most students were probably getting 2 or 3. This student's been able to get a 5 out of 5, and we'll go through and have a look now at why he did get 5 out of 5. Carbohydrate loading forms an integral component of pre-performance nutrition. Compared with tapering, which is a reduction in training volume in the lead up to competition, carbohydrate loading is effective in maximising glycogen stores in the liver and muscle. By doing so, it optimises the fuel stores of the aerobic and lactic acid system. This improves performance in competition by delaying fatigue of these systems due to depletion of fuel sources. This can be achieved by consuming 5 to 7 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight per day for 1 to 2 days in the lead up to a performance lasting less than 2 hours, such as a 2-kilometre race. For an endurance event, carbohydrate loading can be achieved by consuming 10 to 12 grams of carbohydrates per kilo of body weight per day for 2 to 3 days in the lead up to a performance lasting over 2 hours, such as an Ironman or a triathlon. So just going through back some of the parts of this question that were required in the answer. Things such as tapering and saying what it is. The fact that when carb loading, it's actually stored as glycogen in the liver and the muscles, and the impact that this has on the aerobic system in particular. All right. How would carb loading take place? 1 to 2 days beforehand. It's not having a really large feed of carbohydrates such as pasta the night before. All right. So it's preparation 1 to 2 days, or 2 to 3 days if it's a longer event, such as an Ironman or a triathlete. Okay, so that's why this answer was very, very good. Some of the things that the students need to be aware of in this answer, as I've already seen. Students need to know actually what the carbohydrate stores were. Okay, what is carbohydrate stored at? And as mentioned in this answer, it's stored as glycogen, and where? All right, and we've seen that in this response. We also need to know is that glycogen stores allows for increased performance as the athlete has more or an increased level of glycogen stored. Therefore, it's his energy, and that was related to optimizing the fuel stores of the aerobic and lactic acid system as a result of having glycogen stores in the liver and the muscle. We also need to talk about and explain carbohydrates, right? Looking at the tapering off of training. So a reduction, as it says up here, a reduction in the training volume in a lead up to competition, right? That's what we mean by tapering, reduction in training intensity. Most students went through and were able to tell me different types of carbohydrates, pastas, bread, cereals, rices, but really didn't explain the implications of these carbohydrates for performance. Right? So they're giving examples of actual carbohydrates, but didn't then look at their impact for performance. And the third one, as I've already mentioned, was tapering. You know, what role does it play in improving or increasing performance of carb loading and glycogen stores? So the issue for me here with this question was that students just didn't really understand what the question was asking. Okay, if we just go back to the question, have a look at it very quickly for a second. explain, so what's the relationship between carb loading and improving performance? If an athlete is the carb load, how is this going to improve performance? When does carb loading take place? What is it stored as? And what does that do for performance? Where does tapering come into it? And what does tapering do for performance as well as the carbohydrates? Okay? And how can it be performed? With giving them some suitable examples such as breads, pasta, cereals, rice to go with it.